Yes, and today we have an amazing guest. We have a friend. I've partied with him in Puebla. No, we went to Morelia.
Yeah, Morelia,
we
yeah.
traveled with the family. It was
Yes,
awesome.
it was great.
That was a great trip. And we have our very own pastor, Jeff.
What's going on,
Jeff
fellas?
Smith.
Jeff Smith.
Yeah.
He's been around a while. He's currently the youth pastor at Destiny in Indio, but he did ministry in a lot of different capacities. His reputation coming to the Valley, so he wasn't from the Valley, which I think is great.
Mm-hmm.
He's from the Inland Empire area. Comes with a lot of successes in terms of ministry out there at different churches, and he's just an amazing young man. As far as Jeff, you're how old?
I'm 39. I'll be 40 in October.
Let's go.
Yeah.
He really serves as a youth pastor with a lot of passion. Like, he just puts in the time and is very relational with all the kids. So fantastic, 5-star youth pastor. And so today we have the honor of interviewing him. He's coming off the heels of a big camp where it was fantastic. We'll get into probably that a little later. But so we're honored to have Pastor Jeff Smith with us.
Appreciate you guys, man.
Yeah. How long you been in ministry, Pastor?
11 years. 11 years, yeah. So started out as a youth volunteer, and we had a youth dance team, and then I started working at the church as a janitor. But so I would work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then Sundays I had off, and Sundays I would help out in the youth. So we had like 3 services. I would go 8 a.m. service, and then I would serve at the 11 and the 1 o'clock service that we had in the youth ministry. So, and
that was the church in Rancho Cucamonga?
Yeah.
Was it Water Life, or which one was it?
No, that was Abundant Living, but
Abundant
now they're
Living.
called Patria.
There you go.
Yeah, they're Patriot Church now. So, yeah. So, and it's funny, the camp that we take our kids to now is the camp where they pulled me out and was like, hey, we want you to be our middle school pastor while I was still a janitor. So I went from janitor to pastor, and like
Similar.
Yeah.
Cleaning up messes.
Yeah, same thing. You're still cleaning up.
Still cleaning. The messes are sort of human.
100%. Yeah, emotional messes.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
So there's probably a backstory of why you enjoy being a youth pastor, because I know that, like, for example, Pastor Billy started as a youth. Wasn't he Destiny Church?
He was the first youth pastor at Destiny.
He was the first, and then but now he's a lead pastor. So I mean, I'm assuming eventually you're going to be a lead pastor, but is there
to each to be their own? I think everybody has a different calling. So a lot of people will look at that. I think, but Pastor Jeff has looked at it more of a calling, and so I think he enjoys youth.
Yeah, like so. Interesting enough, even when I was a kid, I couldn't wait to be older to talk to younger kids. So when I was in middle school, I would love talking to like the 3rd and 4th graders. When I was in high school, I couldn't wait to talk to the middle schoolers. I always wanted to like reach back. And then I think also what helped was like my dad was my baseball coach, my soccer coach. And I loved watching how a lot of like the young men didn't have like dads in the stands, and my dad would like take them underneath their wing, and we would have kids at our house, and my dad would pick kids up, and he would just like drop wisdom on them, and they're like, nobody's ever told me that. But to me, it was normal. I was like, how do you not know that? That's common sense. But it's not common sense to somebody who doesn't have a man in the house. And for me, that was something that I was like, man, like, so I grew up in Rialto. Rialto is right next door to San Bernardino, and we used to call the older guys the OGs, right? And so I was like, man, I can't wait to be an OG. Oh, I can't wait, because I loved watching how like the younger guys would go to the porch and talk to the older guys and have those conversations, and they would have their ear and give them guidance. And so it just kind of resonated all the way to now. And even still now, whenever I see young men, I'm always just like, I know why you do that. I know why you want to have all the girls. I know why, like, you have to be the loudest one in the room. Like, I get it. I was that, or I knew a friend that was like that. So, I love it. Like, and now I get to coach my daughter's soccer team. So, and my son's. So,
let's go back for a few minutes back to like your childhood. Specifically, I've met your dad a few times. Fantastic father. Your mom and dad have been married how long?
I'm 38 years.
So
Actually, interesting enough, they celebrate 39 next weekend.
There you go.
Yeah.
So obviously had a really good dad, just being honest with you. Can you share with us a story that would sort of symbolize who your father was? And I'm speaking maybe in your childhood, preteens, any kind of story that would convey your relationship with your father in terms of the positive.
Yeah. So my dad wasn't always saved. Like he didn't get saved until I was 18. But the thing that I loved the most, and
was he an atheist?
No, he wasn't an atheist.
Just not a practicing Christian.
So he was almost borderline Nation of Islam at one point.
Oh,
his
Muslim.
Yeah. So his best friend, who was a believer, Chucky, God rest his soul, like actually rescued my dad from that. I remember like Chucky found out and was like, drove all the way down from Fresno and was like, I need to talk to my friend. And I remember them having that conversation, and Chucky rebuked him like on the couch. And
what did he tell him? Do you know what he told him?
Like, I just remember it was like, it wasn't heated. It was just like, he just started going down the scriptures with my dad and was just like, this is what the word says. Like, this is what 1 Corinthians says. This is what like 2 Corinthians says. This is what Romans. And he just was like, that is a cult. That is not of the Lord. And
the Nation of Islam, very racist, and then very Muslim. But if you still sort of look what they do, they take a lot of truths in society or point at a lot of problems. Like there are some very balanced, wise things they have to say. But it's like what the devil does. It's typically ends up being a twisted lie.
A twist, yeah.
Huge twist.
And he was like, he just told me like, it's demonic. And like you being and mind you, my dad and his friend, they'd known each other since I think kindergarten. And so he was like, I can't let my friend go down this road. But the most beautiful thing that my dad did is he made sure that I understood history and I understood direction. He was like, you cannot be a young man that doesn't have vision and mission in your life. And that was just something that just be a hard worker. Be a man of character and integrity. If you're going to show up, show up. And I remember we were playing soccer, and I think I was...
Was he an athlete too?
Yeah, but he was a baseball player.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was baseball and track. That was his thing. So when I got into soccer, he was like, "This is a foreign land for me. Like I don't know anything about that." But for him, he just was like, I didn't want to go to practice or something like that. And my dad was like, "Why don't you want to go to practice?" I was like, "I'm tired," and he was like, "So like I asked you, why don't you want to go to practice?" And I said, "Because I'm tired." And he was like, that's not a good reason. He was like, you don't stop because you're tired. You stop when you're finished. So
that's like not, I mean, he was teaching you life lessons.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and so, and that
Did
was
he do that a lot to you?
Oh, all the time.
All the time.
That's
cool. And you have two other brothers?
Yes. 2 younger brothers. Yeah. I'm the oldest of 3. And that was another thing. Like he always was like, you know, like the one thing that I love that my mom and dad both did was they never once said, you should know better. Because they were like, how can you know better if you've never seen better? You can't say, well, I have an older sibling, so you should know that. Like, how would you know that? So, but what they did say is like, you may not, like, you shouldn't, like, you may not know better. However, we've taught you better. And so for you to make that decision, you can't say that nobody ever told you. And so for them, especially my dad, he was like, we had this conversation last week. So help me understand this before you get this whooping. So you're going to get a whooping, but I need you to help me understand where I went wrong.
So your dad would spank you?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Belt, paddle, hand, what?
Both. Yeah. All, whatever. So like I grew up in the 90s, so like my dad was a so
how about you, Pastor? Did your
absolutely
dad? Yeah, mine too.
Plentiful. And I think it's important for young men. I mean, to me there's an open debate on like a father how often he should with the daughter.
Yeah.
I've probably spanked my daughter 3 or 4 times. My wife has done it much more.
Yeah.
But I would say in raising young men, all the respectful, well-mannered ones I know as adults, they all have the same answer.
Yeah.
And it's very biblical in terms of Proverbs to spank a child.
Yeah.
And we can have that theological discussion because I know that I've had it with people.
Yeah.
It is very clear in the book of Proverbs that you should spank a young man.
Absolutely.
You should. That's what the Bible says. And that's an old school perspective, but it's very effective. And now I don't know about when they become a teenager. There's other ways of correcting a child. Yeah. But when they're a child, like under the age 12, I think it's very effective and should happen to any young man, especially.
Yeah.
Well, sure. I know like for me, once I got to the teens, that was when I got the fraternity paddle. So it was like, okay, you're as a younger kid, like 12 and under, it was like, okay, you'll get a belt, you may get my hand like on your butt or whatever. But then once it was like, oh, that's not working. Okay.
Correct.
He goes, I'll be back. I was like, you just whooped me. What do you mean you'll be back? And he comes back and he had his fraternity paddle. It said Alpha Phi Alpha on it. And on the bottom of it said, congratulations, teacher Jeff. And my dad goes, you're about to get taught today. And he was like, you're going to get 5 swats.
Now, did he got that from his fraternity?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
He has 2. So it's one is
okay.
roughly about like this big. And another one, it's long. Like where it's like,
and it has holes to get some speed.
No. There were no holes. It's just thick wood. Just that thick wood.
And I having, that was your experience. I think that what I've experienced with my teenagers is you can remove things from their life.
Oh, yeah.
As they become teenagers, there's other ways of correction.
Yeah.
But no doubt, spanking a child.
Oh, yeah.
And then I think you've got to judge it with whatever your teenager looks like.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say there's a dad that's listening to this that has little kids.
Yeah.
And he's like, all right, you know what? I've never done it, but I'm going to try it because my kid's driving me nuts. What is the right way to do it? How did your dad do it, or how could he have done it better looking back? I guess that's a question for both of you.
I think so me and my dad, we've had this conversation, and I told him, I was like, yeah, I deserve probably about like 85% of those whoopings that I got. And I was like, there was a strong percent, about 15% of those that I didn't deserve. Like you could have like either removed something, or you could legitimately just talk to me about it. And then we've had this conversation where I was like, and I think sometimes like you just whooped me out of anger. Like you were just angry.
True.
And it may not have been because of me. Like, so also my dad was a social worker, and he worked at group homes. And there was a moment where me and him, like we were kind of going back and forth, and I wasn't being disrespectful. He was just like yelling at me. And I remember I asked him, I said, just a question for you. Why do you talk to me like the kids at the group home? And he like looked at me and was like, I said, yeah, you're talking to me like I'm one of those kids. And I was like, I'm nothing like that.
Yeah.
So, and I get it. Like when you hear my deep voice, you may see like how I dress and, the baggy clothes, like I said, in the 90s. So like in your mind, you're like, I don't want my kid to be that. But personality wise, structure wise, like who I am, I'm none of those. Like I don't even talk like that.
Yeah.
And so I like, for any new dad that has a younger kid, one, never spank out of anger, because that you're doing it out of you're not in control, and that's where mistakes happen. The second thing is like for me, the first time I ever spanked both of my kids, my daughter and my son, we went through the text before I even did it. Like I said, hey, like I need you to understand why this is about to happen. Like there was disobedience that took place. There was, you were out of order when you did this. Like the way you said that was completely like the way James talks about our tongue and brittling our tongue. Like, so we always bring it back to the word, and then it's like, okay, now you're gonna get this SWAT. So I need you to understand this. And so like I would say like those would be the major ways of doing it, like and just being under control.
I'm gonna quote a scripture, Proverbs 22:15. Foolishness is bound up in the heart of a boy, but the rod of discipline will remove it far from him. So that's the Bible, and it's true. So if I were to talk to a father out there, and there's all kinds of things society's saying right now, which society's not doing a great job in terms of outcomes with children right now at all. And I think it's because we're probably over-mommed, under-fathered. I think that's accurate to say, that fathers are being relegated to a small area of whatever, provide.
Yeah.
And so if I were to talk to a man, I think it's really important. You should spank a child. And when you do it, like I have a little nephew right now, his name's Caleb. I only see him, maybe every other week. And there's been a few times where I've had to spank him because he'll do what every little 4-year-old, 5-year-old kid's going to do. When I spank him, it is very, very hard. I don't try to like put it at half speed. It's 100%. Once I'm done spanking that child for doing wrong behavior, I hug him and I tell him I love you and you're going to do better than this. So I'm not trying to raise my voice and yell at him or be out of control and reckless, but I'm going to spank you. You're going to feel it. Like you're going to feel the pain.
Yeah.
And on top of that, afterwards, I'm going to talk to you about it. I'm going to let you know I love you, but that kind of behavior is not acceptable.
Yeah.
And I can promise you something. If you do it a few times really well, it will have a way of curtailing a child. Now, there are some kids that are obstinate and hard-headed, and it'll be a lot of spankings. I mean, my oldest son, Nathan, got spanked a ton. My second son, Mateo, would always dial it back. In fact, I remember one time he would always push to the limit, and then my wife would flip out, and I'd be like, all right, you're in trouble, and he'd back off. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it, blah, blah, blah. And so I remember one time he tried pulling back, and I was like, you pushed your mom to the brink one too many times.
Yeah.
You're getting spanked right now. He was like, yeah, but I backed up. I said, I don't care. Yeah. You've pushed to the blink the last 10, 12 times these last couple of weeks. You're getting it this time.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to do it, but I think it's important to do it in love and not just out of pure rage and anger.
Yeah.
But I would honestly say, I think if more parents did it, like I remember somebody came up to me and goes, why did your kids say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, and yes, sir, and no, sir? And they sort of smiled. Do you really want to know? Because discipline is a part of it.
For sure.
They learn to respect and show honor when they experience discipline. And the unfortunate part, I think, with our world today, we're raising a lot of kids who experience no discipline.
Yep.
I mean, general, very much a generalization, but I think the majority of the population right now experience no discipline, young boys and girls. And then they come into the world, and all of a sudden, when the world actually hits them at age 20, they're thinking the world has to change for them.
Yeah. They're
the world,
entitled.
Right.
It's
They're
like
entitled. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the gentle parenting has made gentle parents, and not in a good way. I do believe that there is a way to gentle parent. However, I've literally watched kids. Like I said, I've been in youth ministry for 11 years, and I've watched just this massive shift of kids who borderline almost like bully their parents. And I'm like, since when does a kid bully their parent? Like, since when do they tell you what they can and can't do? And I'm just like, oh, okay. And then I have the conversation with the parent, and it's like, well, we just got to let them make their own decisions. And I'm like, no.
I remember one of my brothers tried doing it because he had a really rebellious girlfriend. He told my dad, I'm going to turn you into CPS, Child Protective Services. Dad said, all right, go ahead. I'll let you go live with him too.
Yep.
I'll put you in the car. Let's go down there. Right? You're not going to bully him around.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. You can't let kids take the wheel and try to drive. They're too little. They don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. Like it's heartbreaking to watch like kids, and it's funny because like being a youth pastor, you'll have the conversations with the kids, and you're like, you really believe that's true? That's interesting. Where did you get that from? Oh, I watched this TikTok. Oh, okay.
And let me say this, in terms of Pastor Jeff being a youth pastor, he's probably 10%. I don't know what the percentage is of influence in that young person's life.
For sure.
Yeah.
The other 90% is really the parents.
Oh,
or
yeah.
80%. Like, yes, public schools have some influence, and culture as a whole has some influence, but the biggest part of it is the parents. Now, it could be because of the absence of, or because of improper influences, but generally your parents are going to have profound influence over who you are. So
absolutely.
I don't know, whether it's obesity, whether it's behavioral issues, whatever, it's going to be your parents largely. Pastor Jeff is a youth pastor. Yes, he's there to guide, direct, to help, but his influence is probably 10%. And I would argue easily the parents' influence is at least 80% plus in terms of directing that child.
Oh, I agree. 100. Like our job as youth pastors, even young adult pastors, children's pastors, like our job is to partner with the parent, not be the parent.
Absolutely.
When somebody gives us their kid and is like, you need to fix my kid, I can't do that. Like, that's not my job.
You've had parents that tell you
Oh,
that?
100%.
That's crazy.
Like, the problem is the parents need to realize God gave parents children.
Yeah.
God didn't give the government children. Like people say, it takes a village and all this other baloney. That's a bunch of hooey.
Yeah.
God gave children to parents to steward. Now, Pastor Jeff can have some kind of influence and some kind of, youth pastor role, have some kind of influence to like direct them to God, have them give their hearts to Jesus, whatever. But it's a light influence. The majority of the influence is coming from the parents.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
And so God gave those parents children. Now steward them well.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, and I always tell parents, like, yes, we're here to partner with you. We're here to help at any, whatever capacity that you need. But ultimately, it is your job to raise and steward your child well. If you don't know how to read your Bible, then yes, we'll come in and we'll help you, and we'll help disciple you so you can disciple them. Like we'll create discipleship programs. We'll do like whatever it is that you need help with. However, it is you that does that. Like this is why in Deuteronomy it says that the household, like we will study the word day and night and then talk about it day and night. The problem is nobody's talking about it. We're talking about sports. We're talking about politics. We're talking about
there's no discipline going on.
No discipline at all. So like there's no Jesus being talked about.
For sure.
It's everything else but Jesus. And then now it's become like, oh, our religious act is we go to church on Sunday.
For sure. And I think that we've become very selfish inward. So a lot of our mental health issues, and Pastor Jeff's seen it with the youth all over the place. Like we have mental health issues like never before. Never, ever before. And it's because largely parents, society are focused on like self or selfishness. Whereas really, biblically, we're supposed to be focused on God and others. Yeah. So like the true marks of Christianity is, number one, we worship and serve God with all of our hearts. But by doing that, it compels us to serve and love others as well and be less selfish. the dominant philosophy of today with kids and everything else in culture is a selfish or inward focus. And so now, and Jordan Peterson talks about it, how there's an epidemic of mental health, and it's oftentimes, and don't get me wrong, there's some of it's very legitimate. There's people who have chemical imbalances, but largely there's been this huge focus on self, like me, and with that comes all the other issues. Like your solution and your answers aren't found within. Truth is not within; it's without of you. Yeah. And so on the outside, we should, as Christians, realize when we worship and focus on God, and then we seek to serve others, it changes the whole paradigm of how we live.
Oh, 100%. Like you have, like, think about like some of the biggest conventions are all self-help.
Always.
They're self-help gurus, right? And I think there's space for that where it's like, okay, I'm building up my mindset, like influence, all of that stuff. But if that is your go-to, more than the scriptures are, more than prayer, more than seeking God's face and his presence, then 9 times out of 10, you're not going to look at your neighbor as an image barrier. Whether they believe in Jesus or not, there's still an image barrier.
That's right.
And the problem is that people don't look at people that way. They look at them as the enemy, or they look at them as like, I hate my neighbor, or whatever the case may be. Well, it's hard to hate somebody when you look at them as an image barrier.
For sure.
Right.
And like with this younger generation, I sometimes watch like when younger people have a kid, they act like it's the first person in human history to have a child. Like this is for the last few thousand years, we've all got here the same way. Right. You're not the first one to have a child. You're not the first one to have whatever struggles you might have. There's for the last 10,000 years or whatever, we've all been coming here the same way. And so like there's this selfishness that you see. Maybe social media exaggerates it, but in our society there's a lot of selfishness, and there's less focus on God, and the reality is, as Christians, we serve others.
Yeah. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And love your neighbor.
As yourself, for sure.
Yeah.
So you have how many brothers and sisters again?
I have 2 brothers.
Okay, so they all grew up with the same dad?
Yep.
Okay, so, I mean, maybe not too personal because they might hear it, but did you guys all end up being good, Christian, maybe not all pastors, but how did that influence your brothers, or did they make different choices? Because one of the things that we want to get out of this as well is to know that it doesn't matter where you come from. It's ultimately the decision you're going to make, taking personal responsibility, right?
Yeah.
Because we've had people here that we've interviewed that, their dad was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Other dads saw their dad beat their mom up.
Probably the majority come from some kind of substance.
Yeah.
Which I don't think that's your experience.
No. Yeah. No. I mean, I've had like experiences like, I had a babysitter when I was 9. I think I was like 9 for like 2 weeks, locked me in a closet for hours.
Wow.
Yeah. And the only way it got found out, like, mind you, I said something and they were like, no. And the way it got found out, my godfather just happened to pop by and he was like, where's my nephew at? And he's like calling for me. And I'm like, I'll go. And he unlocks it, grabs all of her stuff, kicks her out, calls the police, all that stuff. So like, I've had my little issues, but as far as like parent wise, like no. But interestingly enough, so my dad, he got saved when I was like 17 and a half ish. And then, so my baby brother, all he knows is like save dad. That's all he knows. My middle brother, he said he kind of remembers, but he was really young. He was really, really young. So me and my middle brother were 5 years apart. Me and my baby brother are 12 years apart. So my middle brother Marcus, they both love God, but they're like the fear of the Lord is still like shaky now. My middle brother, he's married, beautiful wife, 2 beautiful kids.
Is he the athlete? One of the youngest?
No, that's
brother?
the baby brother. Yeah, my baby brother Malcolm. So my middle brother Marcus, he. Like they watch church online, all those things, and there's things that me and him we have conversations about. But there was a season like before him and his wife were together, he reminded me of Ezekiel, like the way he would like speak to people, the way he would like talk about the text. I was like, dude, like you remind me of like Ezekiel in the Bible, bro. Like he wasn't like he's nothing like me. Like I'm loud and very animated. He's 10 toes down and he's just like line by line, verse by verse. Like he's very expository, right? And then I don't know what happened. Like, it just kind of like, nah, I'm cool. I love Jesus. Like, and so like he has a relationship, but it's different. My baby brother, all he knew was church. All he knew was men's ministry. All he knew was that then, but I think that was the thing. He knew church. I don't think he knew God. And so he went off to Eastern New Mexico, played baseball. And I remember, I want to say roughly like maybe after his first year or maybe after his second year. Now, granted, so just backtracking a little bit. So my mom and dad actually split at one point.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was during that time frame. And it was
How old are you when
He
they
was becoming a Christian?
No.
What time frame?
No, so when my mom and dad, they split, I was 30. Yeah, I was 30.
Oh, wow. Like
I was in ministry. And it was my dad, he messed up. But he messed up like years. Like I was a baby when it happened. Then it came out later and my mom held on to it. She was like, if you want this to work, then you'll stay, blah, blah. My dad's like, of course I want this to work. I love my wife. I love my kids. Da, 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 da. And so my baby brother was entering high school his freshman year.
Wow.
So not knowing that my mom's holding on to this entire time, then my brother goes off to school and then out of nowhere, she's like, I'm leaving. And my dad's like, wait, what? Like, what is happening right now? So she leaves, she goes off and she finds her own place. She doesn't mess with anybody else, anything like that. She was just like, I just need to be away. And so she had an apartment that was probably like 20 minutes away from the house. My dad stayed in the house. My baby brother comes back from school, finds all this out. And my dad was like Superman to him. Love Jesus, served in your ministry, people look up to you. So for him, my dad was like the first representation of Jesus. So now you see Superman has kryptonite, everything is shattered now. Like all foundation is just So he comes back and it's a different kid now. Like it's he'll go to church, but when he comes to church, it's different. He would just the posture of the heart was just different. And he went through these trials, went through these ups and downs.
So your mom and dad are separated for a year or two, or how long?
They separated for about a year.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, I was the one who forced him to go to marriage counseling. I was like, so what are you guys doing? Like, what's happening? And it was just like, well, I just need to figure things out. And I was like, this is stupid. What are you guys doing? I was like, you guys are going to go to the marriage counselor that me and my wife went to before we got married and after we got married. Like, you guys are going to go there. I was like, if that doesn't work, then fine, whatever. Do whatever you need to do. It's not going to break me. I'm great. I love Jesus. My wife loves Jesus. My kids love Jesus. I'm like, that's now the other two on the other hand, I don't know. But long story short, they ended up back together. But like my baby brother, he struggled for a very long time. Very, very long time. I had a concert at the church that I was at before Destiny. And I remember I had one of my best friends come and preach. And he had never met my little brother before. He had always heard about him, but he had never met him. And my baby brother was home for winter break for college. I think he was about his second year in. And he began to prophesy over him. And he said, you've allowed other people's gods to creep into who you know the real God is. Broke him. And he just broke. And so he began to just breathe life into him. And things started shifting a little bit. But even after he graduated college, it was a rough road for him a little bit where, trying to play professional baseball, had some hiccups in the road. And, but now he's in a really, really good space now. And
let me say, just to key off it just for a second for application for others, a lot of times to become a professional athlete is really hard.
Oh, yeah.
It's like winning the lotto. Even if you have the whatever. You might have the physical body for it, but you tweak of this, break of that, whatever happens. It's literally hitting the lottery.
100%.
And so you see a lot of young people, and I just say this because your brother, let's say that there's 10,000 young people that want to become a professional athlete, right? And one of those might make it. Right. So it's like hitting the lotto. And then so the unfortunate part is you have the other 9,000 plus people who don't make it.
Yeah.
And I've done funerals for some of them because they committed suicide.
Oh, wow.
And so I would just say to any young person, just being honestly, especially young men, because they're typically the ones pursuing professional sports, like have plan B.
Yeah.
Like I tell my son Mateo, he's 6'10" and white. He thinks that the NBA, or I'm saying this jokingly, but he thinks, and I'm just saying, hey, play to your best. At best you get, whatever. I'm here. I'm rooting for you. But the other part is make sure you have plan B. Like really.
He's like, Dad, you've seen Luka. Luka's not that athletic, Dad. I can do this.
Yeah, he's also 6'8" and whatever. Genetically, if you're not going to be over 6'6", the odds you make in the NBA are really, really small. And then you're going to have a lot of other things going for you. So genetically, you have to hit the lottery and no injuries along the way. Yeah. And so I would just say to any young person out there, like make sure you have plan B and C, because that plan A probably is not going to work out. So don't be frustrated if it doesn't. Get your eyes on Jesus. And, I know Pastor Jeff's brother, I've met him a couple times, wonderful young man. But once again, it's just really, really hard to make professional. And if you don't make it in your 20s, you probably ain't going to make it, man.
Yeah.
It's tough.
I remember, and I've never told him this, so like he'll probably see it, but I think I know the moment where in his heart he knew it was over, but his mind and his body didn't let him. And it was right after he went to Eastern New Mexico State, graduated, got his bachelor's. Then he went up north to another, it was like a D2 college, and they were playing at Azusa Pacific. We all went to go see him play. And I remember my son Uriah and my daughter Sarai, they were like, Uncle Malky. And they ran up to him. They're like, sign my ball. Can you autograph my ball? It's going to be worth a lot of money. And I'll never forget this moment, dude. Like he grabbed the baseball and he had his glasses on and he goes, and I can see him about to start crying. And in my mind, I said, he knows it's over, but his mind will not let it go.
Yeah.
And I was like,
it's a dream.
Yeah. And I was like, I think in his heart, he knew, but in his mind, he said, I can't not try. I have to go after it. And I was like, dude, I respect it. Like, go for it. And so, but I think in that moment, I think he knew, like, okay, I think I'm done, but I can't say for sure until I give it 100% after college. And so, but I mean, he got a bachelor's out of it and got almost a free master's degree out of it.
Good for him.
So,
but just realize, like, sometimes that may not work out.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's other things in life other than professional sports.
What is it, like 80-something% go through depression after?
And a ton of them I've known, even comes to suicide. Like it's a very traumatic thing to deal with.
Yeah.
So like, I even say to any parent or father out there, like be careful how much you push your kid.
Yeah.
Maybe they got it, maybe they don't. Like, genetically, like if you look at some NBA stars, even their kids, like Shaq's kids, probably won't ever play professional.
Nah. Even though they have the genes.
They have the genes. They just don't have the mindset for it.
Yep.
So they might have the genes, but not the mindset. So you gotta have, it all has to come together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's not easy.
Not easy at all.
So, Pastor Jeff, tell us about your dad's story. What do you know about it with his childhood, and how did that affect, who he is as a dad and as a granddad, maybe?
Yeah. I know a lot about my grandfather, he owned his own janitorial business, and so he would work at night. And then sometimes, quick story, my grandfather, all I ever knew was him just working. It felt like he was never at the house. It was like, where's Grandpa at? Oh, he's working at this other place. But he just got off of work. So he just all he knew was just work. He didn't stop working until he was like 82 or something like that.
That's not a bad thing, just so you know.
No, it's not a bad thing. Not
like
at
that
all.
Same, like I'll be honest, when I see Pastor Jeff, he's not lazy. When it comes to church, he's one of the first ones there. When we're walking out the last door, like
that's true.
He's putting the time
I
in
attest to
because
that.
it takes work.
Yeah.
Like anything that is valuable, everybody thinks like you're gonna hit the lottery. No, you're not. Typically the people that are rich and successful, check all the billionaires or all this, all those people put in a lot of work. And so when you look at people, there's almost this thing like, oh, he's a workaholic.
Like if it's a bad, like
it's a bad thing, right?
Demonize it.
The Bible's really clear too. We should be working hard.
Yeah.
Go to the, lazy people are rebuked. Hard workers are praised in Scripture.
Yeah.
And so there's like when he's looking at his grandfather, you see there's a legacy of putting in the work.
Yeah.
Not just laying around expecting it to happen, putting in the work to make it happen.
Oh, for sure. And so my dad, he actually grew up. He had asthma. So he loved baseball. His favorite baseball player, of course, was Jackie Robinson. He said when Jackie Robinson died, he said he literally cried because he was just like, I don't see that as a kid, as a young black kid growing up in the 70s, that was not a common thing for him. So he was like, oh man, so it just broke his little heart. And then he said a defining moment for him, he was I think he said a sophomore in high school. He was on the baseball team, starting shortstop, and he said it was right before a game, and he said he had his head down, and he was just thinking of plays, right? So he was just like trying to get focused for the game, essentially. And all the kids, he said they were just playing around and horse playing, and like one of them like pushed my dad, and my dad was like, "Hey, bro, like relax, like we need to get focused for the game, guys, like relax." So they're all in the dugout, and the kids are cussing up a storm, F this, F that, blah, 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 blah. The coaches aren't saying anything. And one of the kids, I forget how my dad said it happened, but they accidentally smacked my dad in the face and like knocked his hat off. And they were like, "Oh, ha, 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 like you're good, bro, da, 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 da." And my dad stood up and he cussed at him. He was like, "Bro, what the F is wrong with you?" And the coach looks at him, he goes, "Smith, you're off the team." And he was like,
and this is 70s then, or what?
yeah, like late 70s, yeah. And he was like, "What? Why? Like, you didn't hear all the F-bombs that these kids are throwing and all the SHs?" And they're like, "Why are you still talking? Get off of my field." And so my dad said he goes home crying because he loved baseball.
This is high school ball or
high school?
Sophomore.
High school. Wow. Sophomore in high school. And he said he goes home.
This is like California, Fontana?
Yeah, it's Fresno.
Okay.
My dad was born and raised. Well, I think he was born in Texas or Oklahoma, and then he was raised in Fresno.
Why'd they remove him so quickly? Did you have a?
They just moved. It's like.
But no. But why did the baseball team kick him off the team?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, like it's still to this day.
He doesn't know why.
Has no idea why. And I said, "Dad, he was like, "Dude, like literally," he was like, "The coaches never had to talk to me." He was like, "They told me once, like, hey, Smith, this is what we're doing." Okay, he said, "I comprehended quick." Like he was like, it wasn't a problem issue. And he said he's like, "Coach, like you've never had to yell at me. Like I don't understand." He was like, "Doesn't matter. Get off of my field." And so my dad, crying, walking home, goes to his dad and he's like, "Dad, I need your help." And my grandfather literally told him, he was like, "Well, if he kicked you off the team, he kicked you off the team." And my dad said, "If I ever have a son, I will never let that happen. I can never let my son feel like I don't have his back." And it actually resonated like later on.
Wow.
In my life, like there was a teacher. It was funny, like my sophomore year in high school, and I had a necklace, and I took the necklace off because it was like scratching my neck, and I was trying to figure out what was going on with my necklace. It was a free time. Nobody was talking. Everybody was kind of quiet, and he goes, "Mr. Smith, you're distracting." What am I distracting? I'm not saying anything. I'm not making any noise. Long story short, like he snatches my chain out of my hand. And I was like, "Why would you snatch my chain? I'm so confused right now." And he was like, "Get out of the class." What? So I'm just so confused. And so I get out the class. I'm like, "Okay." And he was like, "I'm going to call your parents." This is the rebellious part of me. I was like, "I'll call them for you." I was like, "Because I didn't do anything wrong." I was like, "I'll call them for you." So my dad comes in and he goes, "So what's going on?" And he was like, he was being distracting. He was like, "Well, what was he doing?" He was playing with his chain. My dad was like, "That's distracting? How?" He was like, "Was he talking?" He was like, "No." He was like, "Did you tell him to not do that?" And he was like, "No." He was like, you need to apologize to my son because you embarrassed him in front of everybody for nothing." He was like, "You're being petty." And the teacher was like, "I will not do that." He said, "Cool, let's go." Goes to the principal's office, and I got an apology from that teacher. Because my dad was like, in that moment, he said, immediately he thought about that moment. He was like, and yours wasn't even as deep as mine. He was like, "But I can't." He was like, "Now, granted, if you're wrong, you're going to get it."
Yeah.
'Cause, like the same rule that my dad have, I have for our kids. There should be only 3 reasons why I get a phone call. Either you're sick, you're getting an award, or you've gotten hurt. There should be no other reason why I'm getting a phone call. If I have to come up there for anything else outside of that, you're going to get it. And so I never gave my mom and dad a reason to come up to the school for those things. So for that to happen, my dad was like, "Okay, this is outside of my son's character."
Yeah.
Let me say something, because I think there's sometimes a balance as fathers with that. So, right, you want your kid to have some struggle to be stronger.
Yep.
But I will have to agree with Pastor Jeff in this, and obviously his dad was responding from something else. I think that there's a need sometimes to, like, especially when it comes to like the public school system or whatever school, like public school, those are sort of like they're public servants too,
Yep,
right?
yep.
And like we've had a few run-ins with a particular principal at one of the schools out here, and like my son will be trying to sell like
the candies and
chips, whatever. And I mean, it's subversive and it's probably a little bit wrong, but like this principal comes into him and like, and it's very demeaning, you know, and then takes all the candy and chips and I'm going to give them away or to give them to my kids. Strange behavior.
Yeah.
And I think some of that's inappropriate.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
So I think we have to also like, as much as we want our kids to be strong, and there's this balance, I think the Holy Spirit can guide us in it, where, you know, our kids need to be honoring and respectful, but sometimes there are abuses that teachers try to take out on the kids that are inappropriate.
How about this one? I heard once from one of my mentors that tells his kids, you know how it says respect your elders? He goes, I don't believe in that. Respect is earned. Even if it is your elders. What do you guys think about that?
I have mixed feelings because I think there's sometimes this positional. I agree with that generally, like at the par of equals. I think that's true. But like, say for example, the president, whether I agree with him or not, I'm going to give him respect. Yeah. And I, you know, obviously our current president, I don't highly respect. I still pray for him and show him honor because the Bible tells me I should. Yeah. So I would honor the position and the role. So no matter what, and I completely agree with about, I don't know, 89% of what Joe Biden does. Like ethically, he's wrong. Spiritually, he's wrong. There's not much he does that I think demonstrates the life of a Christian in terms of what he's done. So I don't, but because of the position he holds, I think I do have to show him some respect. So I understand that generally with equals, that's probably true. But when it comes to guys that are positionally whatever, I think you should. So like a police officer comes up to you, he's a police officer. That badge means whatever it means. Yeah. And I need to show respect and honor to him just because of the position. So I think there's some of that amongst equals. Like if I was in a room with equals, fine, earn it. It's not always given. But when it comes to people that are positionally higher, I think you need to give it. Yeah. So there's a balance, I think, in that.
Yeah. Like, so I can give from like my position, right? Like being a youth pastor, even like I tell my leaders this all the time. So I get it. Like you want to correct the kid, but if you have no relational equity with them, it's gonna be really hard for you. So correction without relationship will build rebellion, right? And so if you have no relationship with them, be mindful of how you're correcting them. Like you can correct them, but make sure you're doing it in a way of where it's like, hey, I see this in you. I know me and you don't have that much relationship like that. So my approach is going to be different to you to compare to somebody that I know like very. So like Mateo, I have a lot of relational equity with. So if I see him doing something that's way out of line, I could be like, hey, like, come on, bro. Like, what are you doing? To compare to another kid where I don't talk to them that much, I don't know them that well, I could be like, hey, can we have a conversation after service? And I'll pull them to the side and just be like, hey, like, I don't know if you noticed this or not. There's a little bit more grace that comes with it because I want them to understand the heart behind the correction. To compare to Mateo, Mateo knows like how much I love him. He knows how much time I'm like, hey, bro, like I see this in you, but you're acting out, and I don't know where that's coming from, right? And so there's a difference in that. To compare to a police officer, there's a whole nother ball game. And I think this is where we have to say, okay, son or daughter, like when you get pulled over, just have your stuff ready. How you doing today, sir? Can I help you? Yeah. Like it's not that difficult. Like coming in hostile, like they have hostile jobs just like we like. So what you do on an everyday to day basis is complete. Like they're putting their lives out on the line every single day. Like to see videos of somebody just walking up on a car and they're just like, "How you doing today, ma'am?" And then before you know it, they're in a full fledged shootout. Yeah. In their minds, they don't know what they're walking into, and so if on our end we can de-escalate as much tension as possible, say like, "Hey, this is a safe place over here. I don't know what I did wrong. Let's talk about it. If I get a ticket, I'll fight it. If not, no worries." Like,
yeah, and even go back to that, Raul, I would say this: like, there's a lot of sayings that are in the world that aren't always biblical in sense. And I mean, and there's some ways that we can live life fine, but generally, if it's not like in Scripture, because the Bible like says honor the king or honor the president, it shows there's things in Scripture I think that are always going to be true. Yeah. Whereas those quips and those little statements, although somewhat true, and I understand where people are coming from, they're not coming from a bad place. But I think you have to be careful with them too, as far as a blanket application to life. So, like, if I see a priest or a rabbi, I'm going to show respect to them positionally, even though I don't know them. I'm just going to respect that role and that position that they've been placed in. So I think there is some, because of position, times that we show respect and honor, irrespective of if we know the person or if they earned anything.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I was more referring to like that teacher that you mentioned, right? You're not disrespecting them, but then you did have enough what is it? Self-esteem,
Yeah.
self-respect to say, no, I'll call them for you.
Yeah.
You know, that so you don't have to be, what I'm saying is you don't have to be super passive and say, oh, even if I'm wrong, no, you had,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's
Yeah,
what I'm referring
like that.
to.
That was one of those moments where, like, I could say genuinely, my dad was like, if you are in the right, like, as long as you aren't doing anything that's out of bounds, I will always have your back. But if I would have been like, man, F that, blah, 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 then my dad would have been like, yeah, no. Like, I don't, like, yeah, he may have started it, but how you finished, completely out of control. So I don't care. So the fact of that, he was like, articulate yourself well. Like, I've taught you how to talk. My dad was big on being educated, big on being like, be wise, be honest, be truthful. I would get into debates with like my teachers in elementary school about history all the time, but it was never in a disrespectful way. It was like, that's dumb, you're wrong. It was never. It was always like, just question for you. You said that in 1842 this happened, but in 1841, how come we're not talking about that part? Well, that we're not on that part yet.
Yeah.
I get that, but that misses the full context to help us understand. This is why I know my friend, whoever, is confused. I told them that, and it clicked for them. So why aren't we talking about all of this?
Yeah. It would be like a little bit of the, I'd almost go with like what's going on in Israel right now. Mm-hmm. Like people say it's whoever's land. Well, how far do you want to go back with that? Like, right?
Yeah.
1,000 years? 500 years? 2,000 years? 5,000 years? Like, at what point do you want to start talking about history? Because I agree with Napoleon. Napoleon said history is a set of lies agreed upon. Mm-hmm. So, like, if we look at like what's going on in Israel, like one person is going to say this, and there's some very passionate people that are willing to die for whatever they believe that happened 50 years ago, 100 years ago. But really, like, if I were to look at, say, what's going on in Israel, if you go back, I don't know, let's say 4,000 years, God gave the land to them. Mm-hmm. And at that point, they drove out everybody there. So, like, there was nobody left. Yeah. So history is sort of a touchy thing, and I agree with any person when we look at human history, you should question some of it. You should ask, like, is that really what happened? I mean, I think that's why the Bible is really clear. There's 4 Gospels, 4 perspectives on Jesus, not just one. Like, it's not just a linear, here's what happened.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So when you mentioned earlier today that you wanted to be a youth pastor, and it's one of your passions, and even when you were young, you wanted to do that already. You were thinking, I can't wait to grow up to be a youth pastor. Where does that come from? Where was that seed planted, or maybe God spoke to you? You know, where's that passion coming from? Because you're really passionate about that. Like, that's your true, real, like, it is definitely a calling that you have, and you're good at it.
Yeah. So I would probably say, so originally it wasn't to be a youth pastor. It was to be a marriage family therapist. I always loved marriage. I loved watching, like, how successful my mom and dad were in their marriage. I loved watching how my dad worked 2 jobs and was going to school. My mom, she was working in downtown LA and going to school, but somehow, some way, they made it work. Like, they were making things happen, and they were always in unison. And so for me, I was like, if you guys can do it like this, I for sure can do it as well. And I want other people to experience, because I think a good probably 90+% of my friends all their families were divorced. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I loved marriage. I loved family. Even though we didn't have a big family, I always desired to have a big family. Well, my wife, her family is huge. So
Latina.
So, like, fit right in, right?
Is she from Mexico? What's the?
No. Like, so all of her family, like, I think the only one that was from Mexico was her grandmother and her husband, but everybody else is California.
She's second generation.
Yeah.
Here,
like, yes. Yeah. So, to answer the question about where it comes from, I would probably say just being in sports, being the captain of, like, my soccer teams and things like that, and just giving advice to my friends. Like, I used to hate seeing my friends go through things, and I'd be like, can we just talk about this? Why do you think talking like that is okay? Or why do you think hanging out with them is okay? And I would give a different perspective. And I think it just comes from just watching how my dad would walk people through situations, whether it was from baseball to soccer to basketball. And even my uncle, I would even say my mom's younger brother, he would pick me up sometimes, and he would tell me stuff that my dad probably had no idea about. So like whether it was street things, whether it was just manly things. He was the one who taught me about like cars and how to keep your shoes clean and things like that. My dad was on like business, how to work hard, how to treat people right, how to communicate, how to like how to speak up for yourself. So like there are moments where like my dad, he was giving full on speeches at his job. And I didn't know that until I would see pictures later on, and then you see pictures of me and it's side by side. And so like it wasn't something that I had seen, but my dad was doing. And my dad's mom, I think it was her sister. Yeah, it was her sister before she passed away. When I was really little, she used to say, "Oh, he's gonna be your little preacher." She was like, "That one? I don't know about that. Like he gets in a lot of trouble." And she was like, "No, he's going to be your preacher. Watch." And so, she told me that probably about like 4 years ago. Had no idea. So I'll probably say like just watching my dad when, just how he would put his arm around kids, like if they were like down because they don't have their dad.
And so you said 90% roughly, or 80%, 90% of your friends?
Oh yeah. A good 90% of my friends, like their mom and dads were either, it was like their second marriage where they may have had a dad in the house, but it wasn't their birth dad, or it was mom is a nurse and she's like a security guard in the daytime or something like that. So they just pretty much had the house all to themselves. And, yeah.
So if you were to look at society as a whole, especially your friends, peers, even in youth ministry now, mostly single parents, or is there a lot of people that have dual parents, like say mom and dad, nuclear family still together? Is it largely?
So now I would probably say it's a lot more blended families that like for us. It's a lot of blended families at our church than it is single moms. I mean, we do have quite a bit of single moms, but I would say like the majority is a lot of like blended families, or it's mom and dad are together, but dad really isn't present like that.
Yeah.
So,
and I think I'll just speak into a little bit of that whole idea of blended families. I would encourage every person like to try to fight for your marriage as best you can.
100%.
I think that Jordan Peterson gives a statistic of, I think it's almost 80% of divorces are filed by women, at least in America and Canada. And I would hope for every person, like you try to fight for your marriage as best you can. There's going to be problems along the way.
Absolutely.
Like two people coming along, like they're not always going to agree. But I think it's important for every person, for the sake of their own children, that they would stay together. I understand blended families can work as well. There's just all those complexities that come with it. But to every person, as best as you can, and I know there's all kinds of problems. Yeah. Finances and extramarital things, all those kind of things happens. But it's in the best interest of the kid for both parents of that child to stay together to the benefit of that child.
Yeah. And I would even go as far as to say too, though, like there's a reason why God says he hates divorce. And I think a good majority of the time when you have people who are getting divorced, it's I'm not happy anymore. Yeah. And you're like, okay, but
the goal of marriage, according to the Bible, wasn't to be happy.
No, it was to be holy.
It was to be holy.
Yeah. And marriage, it will show you how to be holy.
It will.
It will show you how to be, but you also have to be submitted to God to understand that. I think a good majority of people, like it goes back to what we talked about before, is it is selfish. Now, like the abuse stuff, I'm like, like leave.
Yeah,
I agree. Get out of there.
If there's abuse, in terms of like physical abuse, certainly there needs to be some separation.
100%.
Having said that, trying to work on that too, because we're all broken people. And I've never been a person doing that, but like trying to work on that to make it work. Yeah. Right. Versus I think what society has, the cancel culture concept is like pervasive, both in Christianity and in the world. Like, oh, you did this wrong, we're done. Yeah. Versus saying like, okay, let's try to take some time to work through this thing. As you said, your parents
a little mercy.
A little bit of mercy, a little bit of grace.
Yeah.
Grace.
Yeah. So mercy would be forgiveness. Grace would be favor given.
Yeah.
And so I think it's the combination of both. So mercy, certainly Old Testament, God's merciful to lots of people. New Testament's grace. So if you're living in grace, that means like the way to distinguish between the two, mercy and grace, would be mercy is you total your father's car and he doesn't come down on you. Grace is he gives you a Ferrari in place of the beat up truck he gave you. Yeah. And so like if we truly live out the New Testament concepts, it's not just mercy of the old, but it's the grace of the new that we're supposed to show in relationships as well. Yeah. And so I would hope that Christian people have a lot of mercy and grace in their relationships. And that means okay, you messed up, I'll forgive you. And it also means not only do I forgive you, I'll show you some grace.
Yeah, I think like
I like that. That sounds just really good to do. Why do you guys think women, I mean, you know, we don't have women to defend themselves here, but it says 75, 80% of why is that?
So why is that? So
why are women less merciful?
No, here's what I'd say. Here's what I'd say. And a lot of times women are filing divorces later on. They say like late 30s, 40s. So it's not like the 20s when they're more optimistic. I'm going to go to Jordan Peterson because he's a neuroscientist and a philosopher and has done much more research than I have on it. To try to understand it, look at the animal kingdom. So let's look at deers for a second, right? The female deer, they have no antlers, no way to defend themselves. Something bad happens, they take off running, right?
Yep.
But then the guy has the antlers, he has horns, and he can lock with whatever's coming, right? He's not afraid. He's going to go at you. He's going to attack you. He's going to, come at you. So the animal kingdom is sort of true. So the female is going to run at the first sight of whatever because she's learned, I can't take on anything. I got to just get out of here. Mm-hmm. Some of that I think is true. And I don't believe in evolution in the sense of we came from apes. Right. I do believe in creation, that God created us as we are. However, in some sense, that's also true of women. They don't have the tools always to defend themselves as well, other than to run and flee and get out of the situation. Yeah. And so I think that whenever bad things happen, the visual I always go with is almost like a deer or some kind of animal like that. When there's predatory things happening, they're like, okay, time to get out of here. And so there's a few reasons. One, I would say women are most likely to run when there's problems. But following up that with acknowledging what's happening culturally here in America, where there's a lot of disadvantages for men in marriage and maybe a little more advantages for women. And I say that in the sense of like who usually gets the kids, all the things that happens when the divorce happens. So there's divorces in many ways incentivized in our society, I would argue.
And I would also say too, I think there's also a struggle for biblical women discipleship.
Oh, for sure.
Like there's like in this, especially in the younger generation, when you talk to them about like, so what do you feel like a wife is? They can't give it to you because they've never seen it. They've never been taught. So they're just kind of like, I don't know. Like, I just want to be married. That's dangerous. Yeah. Because you're expecting to just be taken care of. Like, you don't feel like you have to put anything on the table. Like, there's this big, weird debate going on right now with a lot of, like, young people. Like, should you go 50-50 on a first date? And should the guy pay the full thing? And I'm like, I'm old school. Like, if I ask you out on a date, I'm paying for everything.
Should be. I would agree.
Like, I would expect you to. Like, that you asked her out, right? Yeah. But I think, like, when it comes to, like, that strong statistic, it's, I believe, it's a good majority of, like how you said, if they're fleeing, they don't have a strong community of women to help guide them back to their husbands. Whenever I do weddings, I charge the community, but then I also charge the bridesmaids and the grooms, and because there's supposed to be pillars that you're supposed to lean on. And in that concept, they're supposed to be able to say, hey, I always say to you ladies, do you promise to no matter what, through all the hard times that will come, not if, but when they come, you will push her back to her husband, and vice versa for the men, because they're supposed to lean on, and that pillar is supposed to push them back. If you guys aren't willing to do that, you need to change your circle. Yeah,
that's good.
And I think a good majority of the women and even men who are getting divorces is because of their community. Man, like, I would leave too if they're not doing this. And no, it should be, man, that sucks. That's unbiblical. You still need to stay married, because even you
got to figure it out.
Yeah, even I believe it's in 1st or 2nd Peter where it says, like, the wife, she should love her husband and to serve him and honor him, and it says, in your good conduct you will bring him back to your marriage. If that's not the case, then the reality is it goes back to being selfish. Yeah. You want it to be about you, but when you look outside of you and you look at, okay, my marriage should be a representation of the kingdom, and what, like, Jesus chasing after, or God chasing after the bride, that's what it should be. If my marriage isn't that, then there's something that we're missing. And 9 times out of 10, it's a heart issue. Yeah. It's an unbiblical reason of why you're leaving. like I forget what the statistic is, a high statistic, like maybe like 65-70% of the time of most people of why they are getting out of the marriage. It's not because of abuse. It's not because of drugs. It's not because of something really wild. It's not because of somebody cheating. It even in cheating.
They usually say it's the loss of a job.
Yeah.
So when the economic support's lost. So like literally they took women, they said, okay, 80%, 75-80% file divorce. What's the number one reason? Loss of job.
No way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
I don't get it though. Why?
You know what?
How does that make sense?
I think it has to do with the lifestyle. I'll be honest with you. Like once a
Stability.
man, stability, protection,
Finances?
Finances.
Ultimately?
It's
I mean,
ultimately
that's-
finances, but it has to do with the loss of a job, loss of a way of life.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
But, so even if somebody is cheating, 1 Corinthians literally says, I will grant you that divorce because of the hardness of your heart.
Yeah.
Not because I said I want this to happen, because I know your heart is hardened. So you're probably going to treat them like trash for the rest of your life. So just let them go.
Yeah. So that's it. Literally Jesus when he says you can divorce for this cause, and he literally says because of hardness of your heart.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy.
So yeah,
All right. So how long have you been married?
this year will be Siraj 13 years.
Nice.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yes, sir.
And
Yes, sir.
tell me about some of the tips that you would give on having. Would you say you have a great marriage?
Oh yeah.
Okay, talk
Yeah,
to
yeah.
us. What are some tips out there?
One. So before you get married, pay attention to what you're doing in your singleness. So what you do in your singleness is gonna follow you in your marriage. That's number one.
And what do you mean by that? Are you saying like how you treat them, or what do you mean? Like what's the
like how you're treating them? What are you doing when you're by yourself?
Yeah.
So like when I hear people, when I do counseling sometimes, well, I don't even call it counseling anymore because that's how you get in trouble. Coaching. So like, if you're not a licensed therapist, stop calling yourself a counselor because you're not.
For sure.
You are a coach. Like when they say, well, yeah, I had a porn addiction and then I got married, and I'm like, you still have a porn addiction.
Mm-hmm.
You need to let that go. You need to go get help. You need to get some type of accountability. There's a great app called Covenant Eyes. Put it on all your devices, whatever you need to do before you get married, because that can ruin your marriage. Being married for 13 years.
So like even like if I'm addicted to drugs or like so a lot of times young ladies think they'll really change the guy when they marry him. That's one of the illusions women always have. Like he's really bad right now, but once I marry him, I'm gonna fix this guy.
No, he is who he is
for sure.
I remember one of my mentors told me, he said, once somebody presents you who they are, believe it.
That's good.
Like,
that's a good one.
That's very true.
It's like once they present it, you can't say, maybe they'll change. No.
The signs are there.
They're there.
Yeah, they are.
They're there. I always ask people before they get married, whenever we do coaching sessions, I'm like, hey, question for you. If he or she, if they never change who they are, would you be okay with that for the rest of your life? And if the answer is no, you probably shouldn't get married, because 9 times out of 10, that personality is not going to change. They love Jesus already. So I don't know what more you think is going to change. I would definitely say
it's a good question.
Yeah. Like I would definitely say a big thing is when you're loving your wife, like, and I'll just speak to the husbands, is like when you're loving your wife, don't love them the way you want to be loved. Love them the way they want to be loved. So like my love language would be like acts of service and probably like physical touch, right? My wife's is quality time, and just recently I've noticed that it's words of affirmation. Like she really enjoys when I'm like really like just pouring into her and like leading her in that way. And I can't love her if I'm just always doing acts of service. She's gonna be like, I appreciate it, but that's not feeling like that's not what I need right now. I need you to sit with me. I need you to hold my hand. I need you to talk to me. And so I see, and it's mainly like men when I'm having this conversation with, where they get frustrated. Well, I'm doing all of this. I provide for this and I do this. And I'm like, yeah, but she doesn't want that. Yeah. That's not what she's asking for. Yeah. You have to meet them where they're at, and vice versa. Like I would say for the ladies, like I get it. That may not be what you would do, but that's what he needs. So if his need is physical touch, and it doesn't have to be always sexual. It can be legitimately like you just rubbing his back and just appreciating who he is. If his is, acts of service, then do something that you know that like go get the car clean instead of him going to get the car clean. Like that for him is like, oh shoot, like I was gonna do that tomorrow. That just took something off of my plate for tomorrow where I can rest a little longer. So like I would definitely say that it's not just communication, but it's also comprehension. Like we can communicate until we're blue in the face, but if you're just communicating and you're not sure that the person comprehends what you're saying, you're gonna be very frustrated. Yeah. And you have to ask,
especially women. They love to. They I don't know about you guys, but my wife thinks I could read her mind. How about you guys? Can you guys?
Oh yeah.
Like they'll assume like, did you tell by the way I looked at something I didn't want it or I wanted it?
Yeah.
And I couldn't tell anything.
Yeah.
Like I'm like my telepathy's down. My ability to read what you're thinking, it's not working.
I tell my wife, babe, thank you, but I'm not Superman. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't have it. I'm sorry.
Just tell me in simple ways what you want.
100%.
Be very direct. We can pick that up.
Just, like whenever I'm about to go to the store or whatever, she's telling me, stop. Just text that to me, please. Just text it to me because I'm not going to remember that. Yeah. I'm going to come back and you're like, why didn't you bring the foil? My bad.
Yeah.
just before I leave, I'm going to sit in the car for 5 minutes. I'll let you text it to me, but yeah, like I would definitely say, and even for the men, if you don't understand, say it. Yeah. Just like, look, babe, I'm gonna be honest. I don't get you. I'm not there. I don't understand what road you're on right now. And it's okay. And it's not that you don't want to. It just, she may not be able to communicate it in the way that you understand, but say that. Yeah. So then it gives her time to say, you know what? Let me figure out a way for you to get why I feel the way I feel. And then also being able to say, you know what? I may not ever know that, but that's not a heaven or hell issue. That's not a make or break thing. That is maybe in like a year it'll click, but right now it just doesn't. I love you. I respect you. I honor you. I want to make sure we are in unity. So whatever you're asking of me, I'll make sure that it's done in its proper context. But yeah, like number one thing is communication. Yeah, but so is comprehension. So like communication, comprehension, and then also communicating capacity. Like some things you may just be overwhelmed with, and she may be overwhelmed. And if she's not communicating that, you have to figure out a way. Like you have to study her, because like we said earlier, like they're not going to tell us. Like, well, didn't you notice that I was feeling like this 2 days ago? Why would I know that? Yeah. I was playing with the kids. Like, I was cleaning the car. I'm sorry, babe. Like I was not paying attention that you were huffing and puffing. I really wasn't. I missed the mark that day. I apologize. So just being a forever student of your wife, and just saying like, hey, and being honest as a man and saying, hey, like right now, I feel because overwhelmed just means underprepared. I feel very underprepared right now. Like, I feel like I'm doing all of these different things, and then you threw this in the pot, and I feel like I don't have the capacity for that. Can we hold on that? Yeah. I had to tell my wife that the other day. Like I was just literally like, nah, we can't go to that. Like we already got a lot going on. We just came back from a camp. We're about to go to another camp where I'm speaking for 4 days straight. Like, and I'm a huge extrovert. So for me to say like, nah, like I don't want, unless like my capacity is like, and so I'm just like, yeah, like I would love to, but not this time around. Like I can't.
Let's shift gears just for a minute. When did you give your life to Jesus? Tell us the story of how God did that, just briefly.
So gave my life to Jesus in 2007, New Year's Eve, 2007
So teenager? What were you?
No. I was 23.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I was
older.
23. Yeah, I was 23. Interestingly enough, me and my wife now, like we were actually supposed to be married in 2007. We called it off 6 weeks before, and my dad was just like, "Hey, I need help for the dance team. Can you do it?" Long story short, I was dancing, and there was the first time I ever felt like the presence of God. Like it was like I was dancing because I opened up and then we all did like a step show or whatever. But while I was doing it, it had to have been 3,000 people there, and it felt like it was just me and God. And I remember God saying like, "Are you done? Are you finished?" And so right after that, the youth dance team was like, "Hey," because I'm Jeff Jr. They were like, "Hey, Jeff Sr." Like, "Hey, like we want your son. We want your son." And my dad was like, "I'll tell him, but I don't know if he's ready." And so 2008, I went just to check it out, started helping out with the youth dance team. And I remember our senior pastor, he gave a sermon, and it was called Christian Atheist. And I'm saying wrecked my life. And I was like, that's me. Like, I proclaimed Jesus, like I proclaimed that I knew God, but if you would have told me like, what's John 3:16, I could have never told you. I never really read the Bible like that, but I knew God was real. I knew who Jesus was, but I didn't have the relationship, any of that. And so I just started digging into the scriptures like heavy, and mine wasn't this like, I came to the altar, I was sobbing and I was broken. It wasn't any of that. I was literally reading the Bible and I was like, I repent. And I come to you, Jesus. Like I will never go back to that. And so, once I repented, I went and I was serving at the church, but I still had struggles, right? And it wasn't until this kid Woody, that was a part of the dance team, for whatever reason, me and him, we just connected. And I remember God saying like, he will not be set free because you're not fully set free. And you can't lead him because you're not fully led first. And so I went to the youth pastor. I confessed like all the things that I struggle with. He held me accountable. There would be random times where he would just be like, hey, let me see your phone. Let me see your text messages. And he would just go through my phone and he'd be like, why are you having this conversation? Like, come on, man. Like, and he never like just me, but he was just like, you need to actually probably block them for a while. As a matter of fact, like, and it was almost like he was spiritually fathering me, even though he was only like 2 years older than me. But he was just like, dude, like, you can't do that.
That's cool.
And so that like put me on that straight and narrow road. And then after that, I was locked in. And then I would probably say what like kept me. It was a young adults pastor named Pastor Eddie Torres. He was the one that just kind of like, he showed me how to be a servant leader. And that was like the journey from there. Yeah.
One last one, and then we'll, Raul, you can start wrapping it up. Politics this year's gonna get very political. Where are you at with all this stuff?
It's
a podcast, not a.
Yeah, no, I got you. Like honestly, dude, like I've never been a political guy. Like I've always hated it. I find it very interesting how people think that Trump is gonna be the savior. I'm like, he is not the savior. Like he's a foul human being that
for sure
he really does not love Jesus. Now granted, like what he is pushing for goes alongside more of our Christian values. Biden is just what we would call basura. So, so in this season, I think either way, we're probably gonna see something wild.
I agree.
Like if Trump wins, I think the far left is gonna go wild, and I think if Biden goes, I think the far right is going to go crazy. I think either way,
that's true.
Yeah. People thought 2020 was bad. I really, really believe
this is going to be much worse.
Either way.
Yeah, I think either way, like we're gonna see an uprise. Like I wouldn't be surprised, and this isn't like a prophetic word or anything like that, so please don't think that. But like, I wouldn't be surprised if out of nowhere Texas actually becomes its own.
Yeah, I don't doubt that either.
Yeah, like because they're so strong in their belief that like, if it goes back to Biden, I wouldn't be surprised if Texas is like, nope.
Yeah. Let's
separate. Like we are our own country. We're gonna do our own thing. Like whatever we need to do, we'll do it. So yeah, like I think this. I never thought we would get to this place. Like it happened so fast. But I think it honestly happened with the Obama turn. That was the first time that we actually seen like a president really be almost like a celebrity. Where they were on like every talk show. Like we got to see him play basketball. Like it was like he was a powerful, normal human being. Like it was like the weirdest thing to see.
They say with Obama, he really began what was called identity politics. You can compartmentalize people basically on race. Yeah. And I think that was wrong because then I think it fractured our country more than it should be. Yeah. And I was just thinking of this guy, the Boston Celtics coach. They asked him a question recently. He's like, hey, what do you think about two black coaches, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, his answer to him when they were trying to divide him on race, he says, what do you think about Christian coaches?
He's super witty, though.
Super witty. But he's balanced where his first identity doesn't come from his skin color. Yeah. It comes from Christ. Yeah. And I think...
But he's fast on his feet to think.
He's fast on his feet and he's brilliant. He's like borderline really brilliant. But in terms of his Christian faith, he's very articulate. And like his identity doesn't first come from his skin. It comes from where his faith's been placed. Like a deeper reason than melanin or lack of. Right? Because the Bible doesn't even deal with race. Yeah. It only really says there's Jew and Gentile. Yeah. And now there's believers. but believers are all in the same bucket. We're not divided by that. So I think Obama politically started what we call identity politics. He was the one that was really like to isolate different crowds, to tell them you're supposed to do this, not do this, whatever. And then I think some of the problems we have now are because of that. And even in the Christian community, we forget like our first identity is found in Christ. Yeah. The Boston Celtics coach is right now.
Like honestly, it's easy to fall into that trap.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then we have to be reminded. I think that you do a great job. When you're up there and say, look, I don't know what's gonna happen, but but it doesn't matter because my identity is in Christ. I love that.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Sure. And I think honestly, like that was like my frustration. I think I posted this. I don't know if I think it was in 2020. And it was like right before Biden got in, and I was watching all like pastors and all of my believing friends. Like it was, 6-7 months prior, it was like Jesus is the reason, da 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 da, and then it just became this huge, just political thing. And I remember I just said, I've seen a good majority of you pastors preach more about your political views than you do Jesus. Yeah. Remember, stay focused. You're being distracted. Yeah, that's good. And I think it's a huge distraction. Either way, like whoever gets in, I vote, I do my part, but like I said, I've always thought like politics has always been very wicked. Mm-hmm. And so my hope doesn't come from like the government. Now I know we play a part. I know that we need to pay attention to things that are slighted. So side note, I remember during the time that I was when I was a youth, I'm still a youth pastor, but at the old church that I was at, I was also Ubering. And I remember I picked up one of the top judges of California. Didn't know who he was. It was him and like a couple other people. It was there was like an active shooter at LAX. And then whoever was flying into LAX, they got sent over to Ontario Airport. So I just seen these people in the middle of the road. They're like, come, and they were like, hey, we'll pay you whatever. We just need to get back to LA. Our car's over there. So I was like, perfect. So I go drop all these people off, and it's just me and him. And this was the first term of Trump. So like he hadn't been voted in yet. Mm-hmm. And everybody was talking about politics and things like that. And I remember him telling me this one thing. He said, can I say something to you and you not be offended by this? And I was like, here we go. It has to be something to do in black. I knew it. I just knew. I'm like, sure, go for it. And he goes, you seem like a very intelligent young man. And he was like, and I want to educate you on something. He said, you want to know what bothers me about the black and Hispanic community? And I said, yeah, what's up? He goes, you guys vote off of emotions. You guys don't vote off of logic, values, like the things that you guys say you believe in. He was like, you guys end up forgetting about it because somebody lies to you. Mm-hmm. And then he started giving me all these websites to look up, and he was like, yes, pay attention to presidency. Yes, he was like, but also pay attention to like your local government. He was like, if you don't do it, he was like, this is why things get slid in, and then you guys are like, when did this law happen, or when did this happen? And he was like, pay attention. He was like, stop being distracted by this. He was like, and pay attention to everything. He was like, start doing your research. He was like, stop putting your head in the sand and just allowing people to feed you whatever they're feeding. He was like, turn off the news and go do your research. And he was like, I'm saying this to you. He was like, because I heard you talk about Jesus. And he was like, I'm a Christ follower. And he was like, I see you as a brother in the faith. And he said, it bothers me so much being an older white man that I see my brothers and sisters in Christ who claim to be Christ followers be duped by men and women in politics because of what they hear and not doing their own research. And so he was like, here's some websites. He was like, I pray that this helps you out, man. He was like, I can't tell you who to vote for. He said, but I will say this. If you are a true Christ follower and you're going through the text, he was like, you should vote off of your convictions. Yeah. Stop voting off of your feelings. Yeah. He was like, have a nice night, young man. Gave me a great tip too, by the way. So that's good. So I'll never forget that. Now, like that was one of the moments where I was like, you know what? I was okay with talking about politics with him because he was just educating me and just wanted to see me succeed. So yeah.
Yeah. And I hope people look at even the political thing. We're called to be salt and light wherever we go. For me, I when I was young and idealistic, I was first a season registered as a Democrat, which whatever. Yeah. As I grew my faith and became more mature, I realized most democratic policies are in opposition to Scripture. Mm-hmm. Now, there are a few Republican policies that are more aligned with Scripture, but not all of them.
Right.
So as I've gotten older, there's almost no way I've in my life now, or as I've gotten older in my 40s, been able to vote for those that have democratic ideals because they sound good and never really are. And if you look at the principles of it, generally they're anti-Christ. They're not truly like, and I'm not here to say Republicans are going to save the world or Trump's going to save the nation. Not at all.
Yeah.
Jesus can save the nation. Trump can't.
Yeah.
When it comes to political stuff, I agree with Pastor Jeff. I mean, generally on the big stuff, I'm obviously going to usually vote conservative. But it's not like I'm going to always vote Republican because I don't believe that's always the answer. Yeah. However, usually there's more conservative principles that are aligned with those. So we start with the Word of God. That's our light, nothing else. Not some platform, not some person, not some whatever. And then as far as politics go, I agree with Pastor Jeff. It's going to be a very polarizing, divisive time. Yeah. And I think at the core of it, we still have to go back to identify with Christ. And there's one young man that I always was inspired by in the 2020 time, whenever like the George Floyd happened. There's a guy named Jonathan Isaacs, plays for the Orlando Magic. Yeah. And when everybody was called to bow, he refused to bow. He wrote a book called I Stand. And he just basically said, like, in the same way as a Christian, I'm different. Like, this was wrong, but that doesn't mean I bow to something. And as Christians, we got to be sort of different and think different and look at things differently and realize like there's a spiritual component to what's going on right here. That doesn't mean I jumped over on the other side or this side. I didn't take a side, but he made the choice. Like when the music played at the NBA games, he refused to bow to the music. Yeah. And he was actually right. And he was a great Christian example. And I think when stuff happens, take a break, read the Word of God, take that perspective and be careful on what side or however you view it you are.
Yeah. I remember Vodi Bakum said this. He said, I don't know if it was during 2020 or maybe a bit. No, it was, I think, in 2015. Because it was starting to kind of bubble a little bit then because I was the, what's the young man who got shot in Florida with the hoodie?
Oh, I don't remember his name. Trayvon, was it Trayvon Martin?
Trayvon Martin, yeah. So it was around that time. And I remember Vodi Bakum was preaching and he never really preaches about this at that time. Now he kind of talks about it, but he was like, it's not a skin thing, it's a sin thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I've just viewed it in that manner. Even though like growing up, like my dad had me read all types of like Black history books and, I could tell you all through and through about Black history all day long. And I love my culture, all of those things. However, that like just like the coach from the Celtics, like that's not how I identify.
Correct. You're first a Christian,
yes,
and then anything else.
Yeah, everything else falls to after that, and so that's just something that I know a lot of like people that I grew up with, even some family members. It's difficult for them to like understand that when I say that, and I'm okay with it. Like I'm good with standing on the fact of that. Like I stand for Christ before anything. I stand for righteousness before I stand for those things, because at the end of the day, like it's kingdom minded, not earthly minded. So yeah,
that's perfect. I love the way you guys wrapped it up. Kingdom minded versus earthly minded.
For sure.
Being a peacemaker, being seeking after righteousness. All the Beatitudes that we talked about this Sunday, right?
Yeah.
But it's a pleasure, Pastor Jeff. Yes, this was an excellent podcast. Thank you so much. You have a lot of great things to say and great tips that you gave us. So,
amen.
Thanks.
Thank you, Pastor Jeff.
Love you guys.